Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of the Films Not Movies podcast with me, Aaron.
And me, Charlotte.
This week, or this episode, is episode 11, and we'll be talking about Logan, the Wolverine film that is out at the moment.
Yep, that's right.
Yep, and we'll also be looking back on Spotlight from last year, which I think, did that won some Oscar last year, so it was quite a big one from last year, but one we've caught up on recently.
Yep.
So,
is it on Netflix at the moment? Did we watch it on Netflix?
No, we bought it. We bought it on a Blu-ray disc. Easy enough to get hold of. So Logan is, and as I said before, a new Wolverine film.
Yeah, it's an X-Men film, but not as you know it.
But yes, but not as you know it. And those of you don't know, and I think I did know this, but not very well, is that Logan is the real name of Wolverine. Like Wolverine's the character name, and Wolverine.
Yeah, is it not his surname?
No,
I'm
it's
sure
his
they call
first
him
name.
James or something a lot of the time.
No, it's Logan.
Am I wrong? Okay.
I think it's Logan. Neither of us are huge experts on X-Men,
tell.
but we know a little bit. This is
I love the cartoon.
Yes, though I still don't know that well.
But we're not mega superhero Marvel geekazoids.
No, but we've seen most of them. So it's directed by James Mangold, who surprisingly directed the last Wolverine film, which I didn't see but was pretty much panned. And maybe less surprisingly directed also Walk the Line, which was the Johnny Cash film. And I can already
I
feel
can
like
kind of see that.
I can see it already.
And hear it.
It stars a huge jacked man.
Huge jacked man.
Hugh Jackman as Logan. This is, I think they are saying this is his 9th outing as Wolverine. Whoa. And his 17th year of playing Wolverine. So, and from all reports, and it would seem fair that it's probably going to be his last outing of Wolverine.
Oops.
Probably not Wolverine's last ever. And Patrick Stewart returning again as Charles, Professor Xavier, Charles Xavier, and introducing Daphne Keane, who plays Laura, who is a young mutant. So the basic synopsis is, in the near future, Logan is a limo driver. I think he's a little bit down on his luck and is
falling on hard times,
and is looking after an ailing Charles somewhere on the Mexican border. Charles seems like he's struggling with a few health issues in his old age.
Yeah, he's being looked after.
Yeah.
And he's being hidden away, sort of brain-wise as well, because he's losing control of his powers and he's just got to be kept under lock and key, basically.
Yeah, it seems like mutants are a little bit less socially acceptable as they perhaps were in the earlier films.
So obviously we've had 3 fairly recent X-Men films following the younger years of Charles Xavier and co, whereas this film follows on from the old 3 movies, and I guess the latest one would have been X-Men Last Stand before this one, which we haven't actually, I haven't watched. But
I don't think I have. That shows how much it sticks in the memory.
I think that's the thing with X-Men, really. I mean, I loved the first one of the old ones and then kind of lost interest as they went along because I'd heard that they got worse and worse. And I've done the same with the most recent 3 as well, where really enjoyed the first 2 and then heard less good things about the third one. And it's a shame, really, because you are kind of invested in these trilogies, but I guess we've just been not quite invested enough to see them through. Whereas this one, we've heard really good things about it and we were really keen to jump back in, and I'm really glad that we did.
Yeah, well, it feels like from the off, it feels very different to the other X-Men films. It definitely, I feel like, if you've not seen any of them, you could easily watch this one as a standalone, even if you've only got a passing even knowledge at all of what the X-Men are
I guess so.
and what their individual powers are. I think it has enough set up when you can see what type of characters they both are. Well, particularly Charles and Logan. I don't think it's a problem at all if you've not seen any of the others. I think it's so well made as a standalone couple of hours that where the other ones are in a timeline, it's great if you're a big fan, but I wouldn't worry about having to catch up on 6 films if you've not seen it.
I think, obviously, you can watch it in its own right, but having had that background kind of makes it all the more powerful, really, to sort of see them both in this rundown state and the way things have got to. It's quite a different landscape to all the other films.
It's very different, and I think it's very different in a lot of respects to what you would expect from any superhero film, to be honest. It's got a much more of a grown-up feel overall, and that's not just in terms of subject matter, but it's a lot more character driven, it's a lot more reflective, it's darker,
and it's a lot more violent.
So I think we pick up their story in well, it's Logan's story really, but I mean, Charles is in it a lot more than I was expecting. We pick up their story in quite an interesting place where they're both quite lost in life, really, I would say. Logan's a limo driver who's basically just seems like he's just playing out the final years of his life, raising enough cash to look after Charles, who needs medication for his numerous seeming conditions, which is leaving Charles in quite an why do I pick words I can't say?
Incapacitated.
In quite a poor state. And you think, what's happened to these legendary characters, these legendary brains, and these legendary warriors are kind of reduced to this life of hiding, basically.
Yeah.
I think I won't take this as an original thought, but I think I heard it described as, I think it was by the director actually, Jim Mangold, that you could almost see Logan driving around in this limo as him driving around in his own little black box, his own coffin.
Yeah.
Where he's kind of, does he need to break free from...
Yeah, sort of given up on life at
Given
that
up
point.
on life by just... I just think it's a nice little thing, but I won't take credit for it because it wasn't an original thought. But I think it's a very good metaphor for the situation that they're all in at that stage. So when the introduction of Laura and her obvious intrigue to other people who want to find her as well, they realise that their life is now going to pick up some more purpose, whether they're certainly not prepared for it, but whether they're up for it or not, I think is probably the best way of describing it.
That's right, and I think that it's not a plot device, it's part of the main plot, but throughout this film you've got the two contrasting characters of Logan and Professor Xavier, and Logan is ever the pessimist, had enough with life, looking after himself, getting on with it, whereas Charles is very much seeing the good in everything and the positive and trying to reignite that back in Logan, and it sort of makes a really interesting play between the two. And then it's this girl Laura who's the catalyst really between Logan, very much like, we don't need this, we don't need any more trouble, we've got enough on our plate to worry about, and Professor X being, but she, we must take up her cause kind of thing. And at that point, the film all changes and it almost becomes a bit of a road movie for a bit with these three oddball characters all together.
Well, I don't know if this is a film you've seen, but it definitely seems like the most violent adaptation of Little Miss Sunshine I've ever seen, because the characters in it are basically a little girl, a father, and a granddad is what it feels like.
And it does.
So if you've seen that, it probably feels more like that film than it does another superhero film. But and there's some great banter, isn't there? And I kind of wish there was a little bit more sometimes. Well, I think it's a very serious film, but I think the state that Charles is in, he's definitely reverted to having childlike behaviour, almost like you would imagine someone who is old and their mind is starting to go. They might, because they've lost some of that independence and that self-control, and people having to do things for them, and I not necessarily agree with it, so they get a bit grumpy like a child. Curmudgeonly, but then also a bit of the silliness and the carefree attitude of a child. So when he is introduced to a new character, which is Laura, who is a child and has those qualities herself, you can see he really comes to life with this of having someone who is exciting and not a grumpy old git, basically, even though he's the older git. But as you mentioned, the humour, there are some really cracking little funny moments in it, and I think Patrick Stewart as Charles is really upped the game to just make his funny bits very funny, and Logan's funny as well in a kind of sarcastic kind of way. And I think it'd be easy to look at this film, you look at the trailer with the Johnny Cash music and all the kind of grumbling and big sweeping landscapes, it looks like it's all going to be a bit too serious and a bit too full on, but there is good humour in it, and
it's pitched just right. I think it never goes too far in any one direction.
And there's a few other bits that add moments of levity. There's a bad guy called he is a classic bad guy as well, called Pierce, who at the time I didn't think much of, but he actually adds this funny little air of cockiness and kind of funny, but in
more of a traditional comic book baddie, I think.
Yeah, but in a kind of I love to hate kind of way, so that gives you that kind of grasp of something. This isn't as serious as it could be, making it, because it is a really good, fun film despite these serious moments. And there's a dinner table scene in particular which has some great smile, funny moments, and just a real good feel good scene in a film that is not packed full of them, but I don't want people to think that it isn't funny.
Yeah. And the film, it's not super fast-paced in the way that some superhero films would be.
No.
You know, it does take its time, although the action is ridiculously fast-paced. The film itself just goes along, you know, it's more almost like an indie film in some places, you know, when they're on the road and that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it's quite different.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's got a Western feel to it. I think the tone, the music, and obviously it's in this kind of dusty world that we're living in. I think it feels very much, like an indie film or a Western film or both, really. And I think even though it does share a lot of things with a superhero film, it's not that the superhero part of it is just a side to them. I still think that is a major part of the plot. It definitely gives it just a really fresh feel to what I think is quite a stuffy genre, which is superhero films, where they all feel the same.
Yeah.
They're all super explosions, super CG,
Shiny, colourful, glossy.
wisecracking,
Yeah.
shiny suits, cheesy bad guys.
One-dimensional characters.
Yeah, this just strips all that crap away.
Yeah.
And just gives you something. I mean, I think the closest in tone, and I don't think the film is that similar at all, is something like The Dark Knight, which, okay, it's a lot more of a superhero film, but it tries to be a lot more serious.
Got more of a melancholy mood to it.
Yes, but this one does that, but without the being so dour that it doesn't seem like anyone's having any fun at any moment in that film, whereas in this, there's a lot more signs of that.
But it's a lot more real.
Yeah, I think it's a weird way of describing it,
Yeah.
because it is a superhero film, but it is more real. I completely agree. So I suppose the elephant in the room that we've not talked about is the violence in the film,
Yeah.
which is
Insane. Awesome.
brilliant.
Loved it.
Well, we should probably say extremely violent, way more
Yeah.
violent than any other superhero
Yeah.
film we've seen. The things that they would normally cut away from and there'd be a big kablam or an explosion is probably someone's head being skewered or
A lot of
chopped.
stabby.
Yeah, they enjoy a stab or two in this film, and even a gruesome bullet shot. And it is a 15. I'm really surprised this film is an 18.
I mean, I suppose there's not like spurting blood in the sort of, you know.
I know, but there's a lot of blood, and it
I know.
doesn't shy away from anything.
I'm not saying it's not super violent, but I think it's because there's not quite. You don't see the bodily fluid gunk going everywhere.
I suppose
that's
so.
probably helped it.
And
but
there's also a surprising amount of swearing for a superhero film. It doesn't bother me, but it just hearing Professor X swearing, it's a bit like, can he do that? Is he allowed to do that? He is. He apparently is. So I think, again, this is something else where a film we've not seen, Deadpool, is definitely something that broke the mould recently for a superhero film that can be R-rated as it would be in America, or a 15 here, I guess, is as close as it is. So I think from what I've heard, this film isn't similar, because that's a very funny film, is that's kind of broken the mould where he's like, we can make these comic book films that are for an older audience and it'll still work.
Yeah.
And
not so formulaic.
without having those restrictions of, it's got to be down to a 12A, they've just managed to really just blow the doors off the thing and make something that the violence makes sense for someone like character Wolverine, who's always meant to be so gnarly and
his superpower, I mean, obviously is the healing thing, but he's got 6 massive swords sticking out of his hands. I mean, that is not going to be a fight where someone just gets thumped on the head and falls over, is it? I mean,
and you see
how
that,
he fights.
and you see that in this one, which is great. And not for the mega squeamish, but if you are mega squeamish, get over it, because the film's worth going and seeing.
Yeah, it's really good. The fight scenes are so fast.
Yeah,
it's quite thrilling. It's, they've done a fantastic job of it, and none of it looked fakey at any point.
No, it's really well made, and despite because there must be tons of CG that they've used in those scenes, but maybe it's the speed of it or just the quality of the production makes in that it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb in what is, as we were saying before, quite a slow-paced, real seeming film. It doesn't stick out like a sore thumb like it potentially could do if it was less well produced. Let's go with that.
Yeah,
but there are a few superhero tropes, I think, in this film. As we mentioned before, it's still got bad guy.
Richard E. Grant, bad guy also.
Yeah, there are some great random Brits in this. Stephen Merchant, I think, is another moment. A character we should have mentioned who adds a good bit of humour, especially with his West Country, Bristolian type accent.
Yeah, it's his natural accent, isn't he? He hasn't changed it, and he's an albino hiding in the desert.
Yeah, I mean, it did take me out of it a little bit when I
same
first
for me,
heard
but I
it,
think that's because we're quite familiar with him.
Yeah,
and
people who knew him
the
less.
accent and stuff.
Yeah, but his character's funny and plays a great little part in it, and is a good balance to Logan's seriousness, especially in the first half of the film. So
I think he's slowly morphing into Richard O'Brien. You know, I think he did that Crystal Maze.
and
Crystal Maze.
Crystal Maze, and wants to stick with it. Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, so bad guys, there's actions, supervillains, superheroes, there's sciencey stuff. So it still has a lot of the things that would say, oh, this is just a normal superhero film.
You could have made this film in a completely different way with nearly all the same ingredients.
And I imagine it would have turned out like the other standalone Wolverine films, which Wolverine by itself was not enough to drive a film, whereas with this, in the way they've done it, it just being about Logan, Wolverine, does work really well.
So let's hope that the film producers kind of take note of this and how well it's being received. And
well, what I fear with that is that they'll go too far and we'll get loads of ones that are just violent for the sake of it, but it's not the violence that makes it. The violence helps, but it's the characters are great. Both Patrick Stewart and huge jacked man seem so confident and so comfortable in those roles.
Yeah.
To be honest, when I see Hugh Jackman, I just think Wolverine.
But we haven't seen I Stole a Loaf of Bread, so...
No, that's Les Mis, by the way, for people who don't know. But they just embody these characters so well to be able to do something so serious where it works so well. It'd be hard to recreate for another superhero. So,
and the fact that they've been embodying these characters for so many years, as you were saying at the beginning, probably really helps them to do this. You know, they've lived with these characters and now they're just taking them to the next evolution.
Yeah.
X-Men evolution.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a negative about the film. Maybe, this is only a small thing, maybe it is a little bit too long. But I didn't feel like I was getting itchy in the chair or anything. There was just a few bits that I thought they could
have been trimmed a tiny bit here and there.
But because it comes in just over 2 hours, so it's not one of these behemoth films, but it's a little bit longer than some of the ones we've been enjoying recently, because I've been enjoying films being down to a tight 90 minutes again, and that becoming a bit more of a commonplace thing where we were living in a world where things were pushing 3 hours every week. Which...
I think I felt it dragged a teeny bit in places towards the beginning, and then after a certain point in the film I was fully hooked and I would have been happy for it to carry on at that point. So
yeah, and I think we should probably talk about Laura a little bit more. As the character, she's
fantastic.
For a character that doesn't talk an awful lot in this film, it's great physicality to her as a mutant and just as a normal little girl. Has great facial expressions which are funny, and you can tell it makes it seem like a father-daughter relationship, and especially Patrick Stewart almost seems like a granddad, and that's kind of joked about within it. They've done a really good job of just making sure they casted someone who can just embody that kind of the same feeling that they were putting across.
In a very natural way as well, not in a sort of precocious child sort of way.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't become unlikable, which a child who was playing up could easily become. So I think that's worked really well for this film.
Yeah, only the tiny quibble, and it is very tiny. And I've noticed this with quite a lot of films, and I'm probably going to talk about this with Spotlight as well, which is that although I absolutely resent films where I feel like I'm being emotionally manipulated and milked to kind of squeeze the tears out, there's a few films that I've watched recently where I was like, oh, just give me a little moment to get over that now. And I felt that a little bit with this film.
What, so that it pushed the emotional buttons a bit too much?
No, that it didn't give me enough time.
Didn't give you enough time, right, I see.
To digest some of the emotional things that happened in it.
Yeah.
Not that I wanted, sad violins and all of that.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a few scenes where something terrible does happen and no one has any time to think about it, but maybe that's just it trying to say this is the world that they live in, where they just have to be able to get over.
They've had to deal with it and move on, so we've got to too. Yeah, which is fair enough.
Cool. So, as you can probably hear, we both really enjoyed Logan. I think, for me, my favourite superhero film I've seen in a long time.
Same.
I think we're a bit off the kind of popular thread of what people say are good superhero films. There are ones that people have enjoyed that we've not really been our cup of tea. So finding one, again, that has made me remember that, actually, I do quite like superhero films, because I was getting to the point where I just couldn't be bothered with them at all.
Yep.
It gives me hope that there can be a different type that works without me having to spend all the time with the ones that I don't like too much. I can just wait for these quirky ones or these just ones that have got something a little different about them, and I can still get a good fix of it.
We don't have to watch millions of Thors and Lokis and God knows what.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're all films that could work and I could enjoy, but it's because there's so many of them. It's just
overload.
It's just a bit too much for me. I'm going to do my rating now. Which is 4 stars.
Ooh.
Very, very enjoyable film. Really good. To be honest, I was pretty close to giving it more than that.
Really?
I think it's excellent. I think I really enjoyed it. It's a thoroughly enjoyable film. It's one I can imagine watching a lot of times. It pushes a lot of buttons for me. I like the violence. I like that it's a good character piece, that it's well acted. It looks great. There's very little bad about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, a very, very enjoyable film. Highly recommended from my point of view.
I haven't really thought much about my rating, and I wish I'd had a bit more of a think about it, but I think I'm going to give it a 3.
Okay.
But a very high 3. So that's where I am.
A 3?
Slightly cheating the system by calling it a high 3, nearly a 4.
Well, I called it a high 4. But no, that's fair enough. So I would say highly, highly recommended if you can still catch it at cinema. I imagine it'll stick around for a while because it's one of these big budget ones which, compared to other films which seem to hang around for 2 weeks and then we end up missing them, this one should last a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. The second film we're talking about is Spotlight, which came out last year. It's directed by Tom McCarthy. I'm not sure if it's his directorial debut, but he's better known for writing the Disney Up film, which, to be honest, couldn't be much further away from this film in terms of tone, but it might show the class of writing that is on show. So a lot of people in this is a bit of an all-star cast in a weird kind of way. So it stars Mark Ruffalo as Mike, Michael Keaton as Walter, Rachel McAdams as Sasha, Liev Schreiber as Marty, and John Slattery as Ben. So this is a true story of how the Boston Globe, which is a newspaper, uncovered the massive scandal of child molestation and a cover-up within the local Catholic Church, shaking the entire church to its core. So serious, a lot more... Well, they're both kind of serious, but this is serious in a real world.
In a really serious kind of way.
Like a really serious kind of way.
Yeah, it's basically the story of investigative journalism. Yeah. So a new guy joins the paper. Focuses on this one team, the Spotlight team, who run this section of the paper where they cover stories in real depth. So they spend a long, long time doing the research, getting an actual scoop and really putting the work in to build that story. Yeah. And then the new guy comes in and says, why did this never go any further? This story you were picking out a little bit ago and never carried on with it for whatever reason. So all re-energized to pick up this story and hit the ground and start investigating it. Yeah, and that is basically the plot. That is what happens in the whole film.
So it is like a thread being pulled at. It starts at a few little anecdotes from people who say that they've been abused, other little bits of story, but not really the blocks to connect it all together. It's kind of like pieces of a puzzle, and they've all come through at different times to different teams and different people, and there's never really been enough for anyone to really take it seriously. But this new guy's kind of like the head of the whole, brought in to make the paper more profitable in a weird kind of way, but I think he just says, well, push forward with that story, that seems interesting. And as they start to pull at the thread, more and more of it starts to fall into place, and they have difficulty obviously getting people forward for such...
And it's, the fact that it was a cover-up, so it's not just lying out there. There's been a whole... Everybody's been out there trying to do their best to make sure it seemed as if it never happened.
It didn't come out, exactly. And
obviously purposefully thwarting the cause of justice.
Yeah, and the church, especially in America, in certain states of America, has a lot of influence over things like newspapers and the local government and stuff.
Yeah, more communities, and just how much respect it was held in, really, that sort of non-questioning sort of role where you would never even think to challenge an establishment like that.
Yeah, so it makes for a really fascinating film because it's basically mid-90s, early 90s journalism. Yeah. Pads and paper, going and talking to people.
Going back and talking to them again, because the first time wasn't very good.
Talking to them again, trying to work out what's going on, looking through files. It shouldn't be interesting, but it's mega entertaining.
It is really gripping.
Yeah, enthralling. Like every scribble on a piece of paper, every turn of a file, every little nugget of information that they find is really fascinating, and you feel like you can really believe what they believed, that this is a good cause, that they want to stay up late every night and trying to get to the bottom of it. And as the dominoes are hit and more of them are knocked over, there is just like they can't stop
Yeah.
And it feels like a very, I was going to say worthy film. Worthy makes it sound like, it's a bit worthy. But worthy is it's a worthy cause, and it deserves a film, and it deserves to have been made as skillfully and crafted as well as this, with high quality acting from people who don't steal the show, but give the characters and the journalists and the people who have been affected on both sides a realness to them, and a seriousness, without ever descending into, it's not like a witch hunt. It seems very like a very professional way.
Completely. And it's not over dramatized in any way. It's not, there's no sordid details whatsoever, which is a relief, because it's not a pleasant subject. And
no horrible flashbacks, which they could have easily put things
there's none
like
of that. There's not even any sort of really creepy bad guys in it either, in terms of how they're projected. And I think the casting is brilliant, because like you were saying, it seems real. You do almost forget that you're watching Hollywood stars when you're watching Rachel McAdams and Mark Ruffalo, because they just become these sort of normal people going about their job, and you believe that. I mean, it's a bit hard with someone like Michael Keaton, who is a bit more of a, well, to me anyway, he's just always going to look like a famous actor, but those two kind of really seem to slip into those roles, and you just completely went along with them at every stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even though they had obviously little breakthroughs along the way, none of that was over dramatized either. It was never like building music
and then
we
light
found
bulb
this
moment.
It's not like that, but somehow you're still completely enthralled all the way through, which is a real, it's no mean feat.
Yeah, so you might be able to answer this, but could you tell me at all, even roughly, how long this film is?
No, but when I got to the end, I was almost a bit like, like I almost wanted more of it, which seems weird. I lost track of time watching it.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's so enthralling, and so want to know what's happening. This film could be an hour and a half or 2.5 hours. I actually have no idea how long it was, which is a real testament to it. Because where we were saying that Logan is a little flabby around the middle, I don't think this has any flab on it at all. No. It's like a can of Spam. It's lean and mean.
Is Spam lean?
Is it not lean?
I don't think so.
Oh, maybe.
But I know what you're getting at.
Maybe corned beef.
Solid,
compact,
whole killer,
muscular.
no filler.
Which is a great testament to a film. And to describe something as a solid film, it does sound like damning with faint praise, but it is really solid, really well made, really well acted, and just a fascinating story of a horrifying story. And it's a real story. It's got the real names of people in there. These are things that more or less really happened, and I think it's a story that was really worth telling, and worth telling well, and that's what they've done.
There's two more things I want to say, really. One is that I loved the subtle but really accurate 90s setting of it all, in terms of what they were wearing and just the office and all that kind of thing. It was, you knew it wasn't set now, but it didn't feel like a period piece. It just felt completely right, like it just was that time, which was great. And then the other thing was that, they're obviously working towards a goal this whole time. They've got the objective. The whole film is sort of leading up to the point where they've got their story properly. And it's just one of those films where they don't go OTT with any of it. They could have made it a bit more kind of epic and triumphant, but you don't get that. But there is just this one scene at the end that I found myself being sort of really moved by it, and it was just so subtle, but it's just sort of the resolution of the whole thing, and it was so effective, it was so brilliant, and I wanted just a tiny bit more of that just to hang on to it. But I thought it was really, really cleverly done. I
see they kind of, because it is never about them, the journalists, right, where as soon as their job is done, it's kind of like it's away from them. Then it's instantly
it's everybody's story. Then
always was. It's nothing to do with them, even though it has been all them who's done it. As soon as it's out there, they're just the people who wrote it. There's only so much credit, and I think that's probably the right way it should be.
Completely. I just kind of wanted to absorb it a little bit more.
But I think that's why they went with that. With that feeling to it.
Yep.
So what do you think?
In terms of a vote and a score, gold. A high 3. A high 3.
Okay, I'm giving it a 4. I think it's an incredibly good film, definitely worthy of your time if you can get to it, and if you think you can handle the subject matter, but it isn't presented in a horrific way. And really solid, and I can understand why it got so much attention last year. A good film in what was a good year for films, I think, last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 4 from me.
2 good ones then.
Yeah, a good week. One new one, one old one. Nice way of doing it. So we'll wrap it up there. This has been the 11th episode of Films Not Movies podcast. As always, you can find us on Facebook, Films Not Movies podcast, YouTube, Films Not Movies podcasts, Twitter,
FNM Pod.
FNM Pod. And yeah, please subscribe on iTunes and stuff.
Yeah, if you give us a review, give us some nice shiny stars, that would be great.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
Thanks
See you
a
next
lot.
time.
Bye.
Bye.